Alrighty, well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our second installment for our Money Smart Week programming. My name is Andrew Dolphiny. I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library. And it is my pleasure to present our speaker for today, Thomas Dogas. He is a financial advisor and certified business exit planner for CNA Financial Group. He's also a member of the Association of Financial Educators, where he provides educational services for people on a wide range of financial topics. He also offers a unique coaching experience that creates a safe place for people to unravel and discover their emotions and uncertainty about their money and financial future. So thank you so much, Tom, for agreeing to speak to our audience today. Before we jump into your presentation, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. We will be taking your questions periodically throughout the presentation today. So at any time, if you have a question, please feel free to post it to the Q&A or the chat, and we'll be happy to address them. A copy of the presentation slides will be available, so look out for that. If you have any trouble getting a copy of that, don't worry, it will be available in a follow-up email as an attachment. As always, if you have time, we ask you please complete the survey at the end of the webinar. We always appreciate the feedback that you provide us. And I have a web address that I'll be sending out in the chat for more information about financial planning that kind of is going to reinforce a lot of what Tom is going to talk about today. So if you have time, please go ahead and explore that on your own. One last thing I just want to go over is the Zoom dashboard. This is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a PC or a Mac. If you're using a mobile device, the dashboard may look a little bit different, but all of the features will still be there. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can check your audio settings to make sure that if you're connected using an earbud or headset, that everything is connected properly. At any point during the presentation, if you have any issues, there is a raise hand button here in the middle. You can click on that and that'll alert me. I will send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to solve any problems that you are having. And as I mentioned before, if you have any questions, submit them at any time. You can use the Q&A or the chat feature, it doesn't matter, and then we'll be happy to address them as Tom's presentation progresses. So that is everything that I have for you. So it's my pleasure to turn over to Tom now.
Thank you, Andrew. And it's my pleasure to be here today to chat with you folks about this topic of financial planning. What I'm going to do at this point is bring up my presentation. Okay, so can everyone see that? Andrew, does that look good to you?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so as Andrew mentioned, my name is Tom Dogas. I'm a financial advisor, and I have a unique designation and license with the Business Enterprise Institute, and the title is a Certified Business Exit Planner. Both of those positions, and you'll hear about that today, are extremely holistic in planning. One of the things that you'll hear me talk about is planning. And without a financial plan, a lot of the stuff we do collectively is suspect whether it's going to get you the life that you want. And that's kind of really what guides the plan. It's the life that folks kind of define as in terms of goals and dreams. So we'll jump right into that. So financial balance is something that I like to talk about relative to all the different things that folks can be educated on and use in their financial life. And a lot of times, um, we're doing things in a silo or in a vacuum, and often preparing for life events is really the underpinning of a plan. Um, and I say this to everybody, and you could say this, even in your own mind. I don't think Americans per se are good planners uh, in a lot of areas. It's just, we have such busy lives. We've been so distracted from so many different things. Technology has brought us down, all different places, good, bad, rabbit holes. And it's very difficult for us as Americans to do planning. And that doesn't mean just financial planning. Um, However, as a wink, wink kind of a joke, we're good at planning our vacations. So at least we're trying to have fun when we can. But very seriously, the financial planning um, is so important, and that's kind of what I'm going to really talk about today. Because like I said earlier, you can do anything under the sun financially, but you may not know really what it means in the end. So here's my philosophy, and I share this with the Association of Financial Educators, a financial planning philosophy. What is it? And you guys might want to ask this to yourself, what your definition is. But right here, I wrote an individual plan must work. I will be okay. And we're going to discuss what I will be okay means under any and all of life's circumstances, right? So if you're 20 or 30 or 40 or 70, right? Um, we all have a different journey. Okay. But when I work with someone, when I'm educating someone, when someone wants to learn, I talk about educating people or business owners with this planning philosophy. If I live, will my plan work? If I die, will it? If I become incapacitated, will it still work? If I lose my job, will it work? If I get sued, will it work? What about a bad stock market or bond market, which we've seen over the last bunch of years? What if real estate doesn't cooperate with the way I thought it would? What if there's a big business interruption for my business? And the list goes on and on. So this little agenda item up in the top, it says prepare for life events. If, as we're learning about money, right, because that's kind of what this subject is, it's how does money work in our lives? Um, it has to incorporate all these things that we may have planned for or didn't plan for, because at some point it's going to impact, and we'll be able to respond or not respond. And the more often we can look at things that may happen, will determine, will I be okay or not? Now you might be saying, well, what does okay mean? Okay. So some of this may be new to you. And if it's not, that's fantastic. Um, Most of the world looks at something called net worth, which is my assets or my money, what I've made, what my wealth looks like, what that number is, and then I subtract out my liabilities, what I may own on mortgage, a debt, and then what I have left. That's my net worth. Okay, I'm worth $1 million, or I'm worth $1.5 million because I have a house that's worth 500,000. So that really doesn't tell us much, even though by popular demand, that's what the media talks about, these sums of money. But what's really important and what's the underpinning of financial planning is my cash flow. What is my income? We are concerned with our whole life about what our income is and when we're working. And I often hear things that are misleading, or people just haven't been educated or thought much about, well, what is my income going to be? What is my paycheck going to be when I'm not working? And what is my lifestyle like? And do I want to continue my lifestyle throughout my pre-retirement and post-retirement years? And what does all that mean? So being okay is a comprehensive look at all these different things that we can look at that impact our cash flow and ultimate retirement, if that's your goal. If we want to stop working someday, um, we need to be planning. And whether an individual stopped working voluntarily, which is the best way, or involuntarily due to different life events, we want to at least have some kind of thought process and plan devoted to being okay in that scenario. If there's any questions so far, you could feel free to throw them in the chat or ask. The other part that's very important is the time horizon. Okay, how long are we looking at this plan for? Do we have college in the future, or are we out of college? Do we have college for our children? Do we have college for our grandchildren? Are we participating in that? Are we helping out? What about weddings? Are we funding weddings? Are we having weddings? Are we having, um, big weddings, small weddings, and retirement? So a lot of times people will say, well, what do you think about the stock market? Well, I think very fondly of the stock market, because I could show you a chart from when we started recording what the stock market has done since 1920s. It's gone up, but there's sections of time where it doesn't go up, it goes down. As long as you stay involved and don't take your money out, your money will restore, it will recover, it will grow again, as long as you're diversified properly. So the time horizon in which we're looking at, whether it's short term, medium term, or long term, is really very important. And again, that's not necessarily that easy to do. I'm not making light of it. It's just not easy to do because it could be many, many years that we have to deal with this. Okay, we talked about some life events, right? So it's not a straight line. It has its curves, right? So look at those great exclamation points where the market was up, and then where the market was down as it relates to investing. The other thing that may be of interest to you, it's certainly a lot of interest to me, and I'm not sure we talk enough about it as Americans, but liquidity is very important. If we're not planning, right, we better be sure that whatever we are investing in or where our money is liquid so we can get to it, right? So when you have money in your checking account, it's good and bad, right? Because if the bad part of it is you could spend every penny consistently, but it's also a place to store cash so that if you need it for some reason, like for example, your roof blows off in a storm at your house, or you have an accident and you need money because your insurance isn't paying fully for it, or whatever it may be, or if you have a sudden thing that goes on in your family where a relative or somebody needs money, or whatever the life event happens, if you have cash available, okay, you don't have to unwind or sell your investments to support that need. So thinking about liquidity is very important. There's solutions for that. And, I've heard people say over the years, that I want to be fully invested, and that's fine. But having liquidity, whether it's an emergency fund or other money that's not invested or that can be quickly accessible, is very important in your long-term process. Okay, so liquidity for life events, right? When you're starting a family, you need money. When you're, purchasing a home, depending on your age, or where you are in your life, college, weddings, retirement, all these things, look, we need liquidity for. Okay, again, this is just reinforcing what we said earlier. Unplanned events, right? Maybe illness or injury, mother nature, loss of a job, elder care, which is caring for our parents, lawsuits. These are all things that um, are going to happen in life potentially, right? So being more specific in terms of planning, right? Most people are always, our country has done a good job with offering 401k plans for folks that work for a company. And it's a government plan. Just to remind everyone, it's also a plan that defers your taxes, which is very good. It has limitations in how much you can contribute, right? Which isn't necessarily good because it's putting a cap on how much you can save in that particular vehicle. But retirement accounts are incredibly important with growing your wealth, which I call, wealth accumulation, right? Isn't our goal at the end of the day to try and accumulate wealth? Okay, and there's different ways to accumulate wealth. You could do it through a business. You could do it through real estate. You could do it by participating in the stock and bond market. So there's a variety of different ways to do that, but we don't want to think that our retirement account is all that we actually need. Okay, that's kind of a misnomer. That goes back to what I said earlier about knowing what your cash flow or your income is going to be later in life, post working, not just what the value is of your 401k. Social Security, I know we can't get into a lot of details today about Social Security, but generally speaking, that's going to be something that helps us supplement our income. Naturally, it's not going to be something that we can really afford to live on. But Social Security, if you have other monies, okay, that you've been saving for in retirement accounts or accumulated wealth, you can take your Social Security potentially later in life because it's going to grow at 8% a year roughly. That's kind of a general thing. I'm not saying that you should wait or you shouldn't wait. Everyone's situation is different. But I advise you to look into the Social Security, how it impacts your life. We help clients with that all the time. I was just in a seminar that I finished today, actually I'm up in Boston right now. And there's part of what we do as planners is we're not attorneys, but we have a lot of relationships with estate planning attorneys. And the statistic that I heard this morning is that 60% of people pass away without an estate plan. That's a pretty high number. And that's the ones that we know of, right? Whenever there's statistics, there's always the other factor of it. Well, how many do we not know of? But that's pretty high. And what happens there is the state comes in and makes determinations about what's going to happen with your money. Okay, so the reason estate planning is important is for wills, right? You want to define who gets your money, when they're going to get it, under what conditions, and what the terms are. In estate planning, you're also going to have different powers of attorney. So if an individual is incapacitated, who's going to make financial decisions for them? Who's going to make health decisions for them? It's not the most fun topic, but it's certainly something that, in my opinion, is part of an essential in a financial plan. Another one, buying a home. Whether you're renting or buying, the advice that I have here is it's a long life. we have a journey to go on, and not overextending ourselves with mortgage debt is an analysis that we do with clients when they're in that younger stage or when they're in a stage of home buying, and just the impact of overspending. Obviously, if you buy a home that kind of you're over your skis on, or it's kind of troublesome to pay the mortgage, that's going to impact, and you stay in that home a while. Um, you can combat that by making more money, obviously, but if you're not making substantially more money, that really kind of eats into the impact of saving money. That affects us emotionally, that affects us practically. So when we're talking about home buying and whatnot, that is always a topic that it's like one of our biggest outlays of our hard-earned dollars. And again, these are all part of the events that are happening in our life that, again, show up in the journey of financial planning. So a little bit about how debt affects liquidity. Nearly 4 in 10 Americans would have to borrow money if they were hit with an unexpected bill. So here again, this is the unexpected bill is the life event, the thing that happened that prevents us from being able to, not borrow or not rob from an investment to pay for whatever that unexpected incident is. So just thinking about that is important as it relates to the overall journey that we're on. I might fly through some of these things here. So yeah, here, maxing out credit cards, okay. The only comment I'd like to make here is if you have credit card debt, which many of us have, and you're paying 20% on that balance that you have on, the part of the credit card bill that you didn't pay off, right? Whatever you still owe, say it's $1,000, okay, and you're just paying the interest. Let's say that interest is 20%. The thought here is, okay, I'm being charged 20% on that $1,000. I'm invested in the stock market, or I'm invested in stocks or bonds anywhere, or real estate. But if I'm not making 20%, then I'm losing money, right? I'm losing my money overall. So I may have to rethink what I'm doing with my debt. Maybe one idea is, if you're invested in your 401k, is to stop investing in your 401k until you can pay off the credit card and then resume paying. Because the bottom line is, if you can make 30% a year, which is difficult, not unheard of, or 25%, you're losing money if you're paying 20% on your credit card. So there's always a lot of, talking, explanation, learning about how do I deal with debt in my life. Taking out a home equity loan to do repairs on your house, or, funding different things, that come up. Okay. Student loans, right? How do we deal with student loans? Again, all of these different things affect our liquidity, and they affect our ability to save money and enable us to keep on that short-term, medium-term, and long-term path of what am I going to have when I retire? What is my income going to look like when I retire? What is my cash flow going to be? Okay. Borrowing against retirement savings. I mean, you can't put that all back necessarily once you take it out. Okay, so you say, what's liquid? Okay, your bank accounts are right there, what we talked about in the beginning. I'm not sure if any of you know about cash value life insurance, but it's an asset class. It's something that we use for liquidity because you basically can establish a policy that's a contract, and your money goes in to protect your income if, God forbid, you're not here anymore. But there's also a valuable cash value portion of it that builds, that you can take out, that you can borrow against, that you can create a home equity line against. I'm not sure if many of you know this, but it acts just like a home. Okay. It's I actually refer to it as high equity cash value life insurance. It's so if you have, and this is very, very top line, we can't go into any details on this, but if you have a life insurance policy, and let's just say it has $100,000 of cash value in it, you could either borrow against that, or you can get a line of credit against that cash value because it's a tier one asset. It's liquid. When a bank looks at that, it's liquid. Okay, so they'll give you a line of credit on it, just like they'll give you a line of credit on your home. Okay, so it's a way to still have an asset, but also have access to it. Mutual funds, as you get down the line here, the 401k, the real estate equity, those things are less liquid. Not that they're not good, we just have to be balanced, right? Like I said in the beginning, we have to have a balanced approach if we can against all these different things that are available to us. Okay. Liquid, I'm going to cruise by some of these because we've talked about them already. Okay, so keeping 20% of your liquid funds in the bank and the rest in cash value, life insurance, and accessible investments. The only reason this is up here is because people don't often know, well, how much should I save? How much should I put in my emergency fund? How much should I be liquid? And it's just, thinking about um, your life and thinking about, um, you know, if you have a very, very secure job, right? You may be different than someone who has a job that's a little bit more volatile. So if you need to keep 20% of your liquid funds available in case you lost your job or in case you wanted to change jobs, okay? These are the things that we're talking about life events for. Some people stay stuck in a job that they don't like because they're not planning for how they're going to, in a year or two, maybe save up enough money or put money in certain areas that they can access it to, and then maybe be able to change jobs because they'll have to live on their savings. So it all comes down to planning. That's kind of why this is up here. Also, people will ask me, how much should I save? If you read articles in wherever on the internet, a lot of times it says, you need to be saving 20% of your gross income. That's not easy. And it's hard to do on your own. But these are just some parameters to think about. Okay. So I want to talk about something here that I want to digress for a minute and just share with you a little bit about the financial industry that we are all in. So there's about 500,000 financial advisors in America. I will say that there's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of holistic ones, but there's a lot of narrow ones. When I say narrow, I mean their goal, which is very important and very noble, is to invest money in the stock market for people. We call that assets under management. That's how we get paid for that. Okay. However, the cash flow problem in America is a bigger problem than people think. going back to one of my first slides with, which I shared with you earlier, the difference between net worth and cash flow income. So typically today, what we earn that comes into our household, okay, we just put in a checking account, and then the checking account pays for our bills, right? A lot of times, especially in the last bunch of years, we've become less intimate with our money. Technology has enabled most of us, not all, but most of us, to not pay attention to our credit card bills, not pay attention to what we're paying for things, because everything's done electronically, everything's set up on direct deposit, direct withdrawal. So our credit card comes in, gets paid without us maybe even noticing what's on there. And it, enables us to not even look at what we're paying for things. It makes us less intimate with our money. And when we're less intimate with our money, we get further and further away from being able to set goals and be able to set dreams. So, what I've been involved in for many years is being able to set up a cash flow system, which now allows you to save first into a wealth building account and then pay your bills after that. So you have intentional discretion on where your money's going. It's not just going into a, you know, big bowl and being sucked out. So when I talk about a financial community of 500,000 advisors, in my opinion, every one of those advisors should be doing that. Every bank should be doing that, right? But we don't. That's not how our financial system is set up. But it's very important. So my advice that I always give people is be looking at your cash flow and be looking at what you're saving and put a system, an intentional system in place, which we've developed at my firm, which takes the automation to another level and allows an individual to save into a wealth building account, a weekly basis if you're paid weekly, monthly, however you're paid, whether even if you're a 1099, if you have lumpy income, you can still set up the system, and then that wealth will automatically build just like a 401k. See, one of the benefits of a 401k is that it's systematic savings, right? The money comes out of your paycheck. You don't even see it, whether you're contributing 2% of your pay or 10% of your pay. It's coming out, it's going into that systematic savings, it's getting invested, and you are living on what the balance of that money is, or your net income. This is the same concept, okay? And in that wealth building account, it helps you work with the financial advisor, and it also helps you build wealth for whatever you want. It's not necessarily for your future. It could be for a house. It could be for college. It could be for a vacation home. It's still the individual's money, and it's still something that you control. But this type of a atmosphere is put in place to help America, prepare for the future. So what you earn goes into the wealth building account. You could become a world-class saver with this system. And you could also be doing different things to take a look at your financial life. In this process, you can create a budget. Not everyone likes to create a budget because it's really difficult to figure out everything that you're going to have to budget. But if you know that you spend $5,000 a month to run your life, okay, and you could or 10,000. That's 5,000, and your net income is 5,500. You can put 500 in a wealth building account, and then live on the rest, which is the 5,000. You could look at uh, all your expenses, whether they're fixed or variable, and decide whether you want to move forward with things or kind of consolidate loans, reduce finance charges. Again, what we were talking to earlier about managing credit card debt. Um, People look at mortgage payments, whether they're refinancing or whether they're consolidating. Like all these different things are a difficult job. And however, on the journey, again, of short term, medium term, and long term planning, these are the things we can constantly look at to try and make things better, improve our situation. So we really went pretty quick through that. I don't know where we are on time, Andrew. Let's see.
Got plenty of time.
We got plenty of time. Do we want to take any questions?
If anybody does have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat. We'd be happy to answer. Could you speak about annuities?
Absolutely. Okay, annuities. The job of number one, your Social Security payment, when you get it someday, is an annuity. What is the definition of an annuity? The definition of an annuity is a guaranteed income stream or income payment for life. Okay, that's the definition of guaranteed income, typically monthly, for your whole life, for as long as you're alive. You could do that as a single life, one person, or as a joint life with your spouse if you're married. For many years, the annuities received very bad reviews. People didn't like them for many years. The industry has changed. Some of you may know, some of you may not know. The reason they were kind of frowned upon or looked on poorly is annuity companies or advisors that sold annuities made very high commissions. So let's say if the commission in a year was 7%, very simply, that means if I sold an annuity years ago, and there's probably still some of them out there today, I don't really know the ones that are like that, but if it was 7% a year that you had to pay for the fee of owning that annuity product, that meant if the stock market, let's say for the S&P 500, went up 10%, the first 7% would go to the advisor, and then 3% would go to the individual. That's a pretty bad deal. That's why they had such poor opinions, which rightfully so. And wow, in a down year, that's really bad because the advisor is still making 7%. Most of the annuities today that are worth their weight are charging between 1% and 2%. Some of them have no fees, okay? And I'll tell you what that means. So some of them have 1% or anywhere between 1% and 2%. That's much more palatable. That is about the same amount that a financial advisor would charge somebody to manage their assets. So if they're just managing their money in the stock and bond market, very, very competitive rates are around 1%, 1.5%, 2%, depending on the platform somebody's in. So the annuities have come down very favorably in line with the competitor of theirs, which is just owning assets or owning stocks and bonds right straight up in the market. That's a good thing. Some of the annuity companies out there that have this type of product, just so you're aware, not that I'm trying to tell you where to go, but Allianz, Lincoln, Bright House, uh, what else? Transamerica, Nationwide. Okay. A lot of those guys have phenomenal products today for the consumer. Okay. And they're anywhere from fees from 1 or 2%. Now, sometimes people paying any fees. Okay. If you're that type of a person, they do make annuities that are no fee. Now, you know there's a fee, and I know there's a fee because if a company had no fees, how would they stay in business, right? Like it's impossible. What they do is they develop ceilings. They call them caps. So if you're invested in an annuity, let's say that is investing in the S&P 500, which is 500 of the largest companies, and the S and your let's say your cap is at 10%, and the index goes up to 15%, and you're in a no fee annuity, basically you're only able to make 10%, whereas they're going to make the extra 5. And I'm simplifying it very much. It's much more complex than that. But basically, you have limitations or ceilings on the return that you can get in a given year, which some people like. You know, that I'm happy with 10%. I don't want to pay any fees. So everything is out there depending on how you want to view it. The other thing about annuities are they've really advanced. And like I said, the uh, the main goal is to guarantee a lifetime stream of income as long as you're alive. Okay. Now, they've also built in a lot of these annuity companies, they have two pieces to them, if you could follow me on this. They can accumulate your wealth, meaning grow it, and they could also distribute your wealth back to you, which means you're going to take that money that an annuity grew to and then create a guaranteed income payment monthly for life. So you can distribute it back to yourself, right? As in the form of income. You give up the balance of what it's worth. Let's say it grew to $500,000. You put $200,000 in it. 15 years later, that annuity was worth 500,000. You would trade in that 500,000 to the annuity company. You'd give it to them, and then they would give you a percentage of that 500,000. And then again, I'm oversimplifying it. It's not a rate of return, it's a distribution rate. So 6%, depending on your age, 7%, or 8%, 9%, 10%, right? So you basically kind of have the best of both worlds. You're able to accumulate wealth, and then you're able to turn that into an income stream if you buy it that way. Okay. What that kind of product also provides, okay, in certain companies. I mentioned ceilings before. Okay. Some of these companies have ceilings, right? How much you can make on the return. They also have floors, okay, or buffers. Let's use the word floor. Let's say you're in your 60s and you've, you know, been saving into your 401k and into your retirement, accounts and whatnot, but you're kind of tired of, the up and down of the stock market. And you're approaching, now where the time horizon is more important than when you were 30, right? What the market does is more important when you're 30 than when you're 60 than when you're 30. Because when you're 30, you have time to recuperate. You have time for that money to restore itself and grow again, right? When you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s, you have less time. So you may say, hey, I want to be in an annuity that gives me protection. Okay. What do I mean by protection? There are annuities out there that you can lose 20% of your principal and not lose a penny. So let's take the example. You put $100,000 into this annuity and it has a 20% floor. And it had, let's say it has a 30% upside. Okay. And let's say your money is going to be invested. I'll just keep using the same thing. There's a lot of different things that could be invested in, but let's say it's invested in the S&P 500 because a lot of people know that index and they're kind of aware. That's what we hear on TV all the time. That's what they're talking about, right? What's happening with the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, the Dow, right? All those indices. So for this example, we're going to put $100,000 into the S&P 500, and you have a 20% downside protection. Let's say your neighbor puts $100,000 straight up into the S&P index, right into the index. He doesn't have it in this annuity. He has no protection. So when the stock market goes down 25% in a given year, and it doesn't always do that, but it has, that person, your neighbor, in theory, right, is going to lose 25% of his money. Okay. So it's going to be, instead of being worth 100,000, it's going to be worth 75,000. You, however, heard about this annuity product. So you put $100,000 into the annuity that invested in the S&P 500, and the market went down 25%. You will lose 5% only of your money. So your principal will stay at 95,000 because you had 20% of it was protected. So you weren't losing like your neighbor lost 25%. So his account at the end of the year said 75,000 and yours said 95,000. That feels pretty good, right? So practically, it's a better situation. Emotionally, it's certainly a better situation. And here's why it's even better. Let's say the following year, the S&P goes up 10%. Okay. Your account started out at 95,000 and it grew 10%. So it's going to grow 9,500. His account is only going to grow 10% off his 75,000. So his is only going to be 7,500. So and he's at a lower level. So you are far surpassing your neighbor in this situation than you could imagine. And this is where the annuity market has come from. And there's lots of different ways, again, that you could use these products. Again, back to my original slide, which the name of the game is, what is your cash flow going to be? And what is your income be when you stop working? Okay. So all these things in the annuity world can help you balance out what you're doing to try and be more certain of what your income will be, than just having a net worth of some number, and then trying to figure out what to do at that point. So and that was like a long description of annuities. If there's anything else about annuities that you want to know, you could ask.
All right. A couple other questions. Just curious, did your financial advisement pre-pandemic include planning that proved helpful during the global pandemic?
It's a great question. Absolutely. So liquidity was very important. Always having emergency funds was very important, right? Because the job market was crazy. Everything was unlike we've seen before. So clients that needed money had savings, liquid savings in certain areas. that we had set them up with, whether it was, um, equity lines on their real estate, whether it was cash value life insurance, whether it was short-term, uh, treasury bills, which we didn't have a lot of then because the interest rates were like nothing, which now they're totally different. So you can get it, a very safe treasury bill now and you can get it for 4 or 5% interest. But the liquidity piece was very important. I also got involved with a lot of business owners with PPP funds because businesses were stuck with no customers, and the government. I'm sure how many trillions the government's been giving out since then. So I was involved in a lot of helping business owners work with their accountants to figure out how to get the loans, what to use the money for, and obviously trying to make sure that it was forgiven. Under the law, so you didn't have to pay it back. But then there were some instances where, people did have to pay back in certain situations, not a lot, but you needed to have that money available down the road. So a lot of that planning was very helpful. But more so on the you know, the liquidity side, it was a very, very important. However, if you remember the stock market really plunged big time in 2020. And a lot of my advice to clients is uh, so I don't trying to time the market is impossible. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So I believe in that. Most of the time in that first 6 to 9 months, it was just, telling my clients who were worried about their money, like that it was going to, rebound and not to panic. Okay. Um, Panicking in that kind of environment would have resulted in, if people sold out all their investments, then it becomes, well, when do you get back? When do you get back in? How do we time the market? If I don't know and the people around me don't know, then a lot of times people are, we become our own worst nightmares because that is such a difficult thing to um, deal with. Um, but people will always say, and you may hear this in the news, but this time is different. But if you look at and you write this down, the index chart, if you looked up the index chart on the internet, it'll show you how the market has grown from the 20s to now through all political situations, through wars, through this and that. You just have to kind of know your time horizon. Um, and you will know that the wealth is restored if you're allocated properly, if you're diversified. Um, Another thing that people maybe misunderstand, and what we do with all of our clients, is they are diversified in the money and the balance of their money. So what do I mean by diversified? Diversified is not owning 10 stocks. Diversified means owning 7, 8, 9, 10,000 stocks. Okay, portfolios that are built by professional money managers like Fidelity, like BlackRock. There's many, many, many more. Okay, these guys, right, and girls are professional money managers. You may own, you know, Amazon and Google and all of those guys, but in these portfolios, you're owning tiny percentages of that company, okay? Because you're owning, maybe 8, 9, or 10,000 companies domestically and overseas globally. That's diversification in my estimation. So having people set up that way with our clients was extremely valuable. And I'll tell you factually why. So if my clients' portfolios were going down, and this was a real analysis that I did for people, let's say the S&P at the time, or the Dow, as I was tracking the S&P, the Dow, the NASDAQ, and the Russell 2000, which is 2000 like small and medium-sized companies. Those indexes were going down 30-40% in the 2 or 3 months, 4 months after the pandemic. So from March, let's say, when that happened, they were going upwards to 40%. Portfolios that my clients were in were only going down 20 and 25%. Why do I say that? First of all, it's a fact. Second of all, I don't know how many of you know this, but the S&P 500 is unweighted, meaning every year, right, the 7 top stocks in the S&P become more and more and more weight in the overall portfolio than all the other stocks, 500 stocks in there. I mean, you might have heard this on TV and in the news. The Googles, the Amazons, all these companies. Those 7 companies are really driving the S&P 500 index. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just an awareness thing, because you may not want to be so undiversified where that whole index is being driven by the technology sector. Maybe you do want it. It's not a judgment question. It's just a factual question of how you want to be invested, how you want to be diversified. So the reason my clients' portfolios weren't down as much, because they technically didn't own as much of those companies as other people did who were straight up owning the S&P 500. And the increases are greater, but the decreases are less. So it all really depends on you, the individual person. But having information, having data about what you're doing is really the most important thing in the education that you have, because everyone looks at the world differently. And what's good for one person may not be good for another person. So it's really the facts that help us determine what options we want to participate in. So hopefully that helped, made sense. Anything else?
All right. What types of insurance plans do you recommend we should all have?
Okay, so insurance, right, is very important as part of your overall financial plan. Extremely important. I always recommend that, like all my clients, I look at their homeowners insurance, I look at their automobile insurance, because a lot of them don't even know how they work. Here's a common thing in a automobile policy, and by law you have to have it, right? If you have a mortgage on your home, you have to have home insurance. Okay, those are good things. But let's say on an automobile, a lot of times the liability coverage that someone carries is $300,000. God forbid you get in an accident and you injure somebody, or God forbid you kill somebody, or create massive damage. The likelihood in today's society of you being sued for a lot of money, maybe if you injured somebody and they couldn't go to work, you're going to be sued for lost wages, which could be millions and millions of dollars, right? Think about somebody even making $100,000 a year that works for 40 years. That's $4 million. So I always advise people get umbrella insurance. Okay, umbrella insurance protects you, lets you sleep at night if weird, unfortunate, crummy things happen in your life. Okay. Home insurance, obviously, they're going to insure you to rebuild your home. God forbid if your home, gets destroyed, whether it's in a fire or whatnot. Other types of insurance, life insurance, income insurance, they're kind of whether you look at whether you're incapacitated, sick or hurt, or you pass away, okay? All those things impact someone's financial plan, okay? And I can't go into a lot of detail about this, but just very briefly on life insurance to me is income insurance, okay? That's what you're protecting. If let's just say a normal family has, there's a husband and a wife and a couple of kids. If the breadwinner's not there anymore, right? Everything is devastated. Your financial life or your financial future changes dramatically. So what you're doing there is basically insuring against somebody's income not being there. You could do that in two ways. You could rent insurance, okay? Or which is like renting a home, or you could buy your insurance and own it, like owning a home. So it's temporary insurance, which is typically called term, very important. Permanent insurance is also very important, but that's an asset. It's not a liability like term insurance. Term insurance, I hope nobody that I work with ever collects on that because their insurance is there for a certain amount of time, 20 years, 30 years, 10 years. Okay, so if it expires and you had it for 20 years in year 21, you don't have the insurance anymore. And if something happened to you, if you were no longer here, you passed away, your family will have, that financial burden of that lost income. So I educate clients on, the different types of insurance that's available, the balance of using temporary or term or whole life, which is permanent. There's other types of permanent insurance. Can't really get into that. And then, another way to protect your income is to buy disability insurance. So if you're hurt or sick, okay, you can, the insurance companies will generally um, enable somebody to have enough insurance to replace 60% or 70% of their income. So if somebody could do that versus have no income, that really helped their long-term financial plan. If you don't have it, it's really going to eat away at your savings, your investments, whatever you may have. So it's again in it's in the thinking about my whole life. Also, there's long-term care insurance. Okay. If you look at the statistics there, 66% of people in America will have a long-term care event, meaning they won't be able to toilet themselves. They won't be able to bathe themselves. They won't be able to clothe themselves. They won't be able to get from the bed to the chair to the park, right? So when those things happen, you need an aid or you need to be in a nursing home or something like that. Medicare, when you're 65, does not pay for anything really over 90 days. So if it's beyond 90 days, you have to reach into your pocket to um, to go into a nursing home or an assisted living or have an aide come to your home. So that's coming out of your hard-earned money. You can buy insurance for long-term care through like a policy, like a standalone policy that's like automobile insurance, which is a complete expense, or you can buy it inside a life insurance plan, where it's an asset, it's not a liability. So that's a very quick uh, review of some of the insurances that are important to be educated about and think, which ones are appropriate for you. Anything else?
Somebody asked when this webinar is going to end. It's going to end when when the questions are done. Tom has agreed to stay on past the hour and answer any questions that anybody might have. So
Yeah, feel free to ask.
maybe Thomas, we wait to see if any other questions come in. What can you say has changed in the post-pandemic world in terms of financial planning and what people should now be paying attention to when they're structuring their finances?
I think the media is one of the worst things to pay attention to. You might want to pay attention to it, but you might not want to use the advice because the advice that's given is so generic and it may not apply to you. Um, I really, so my best advice for you is to seek out an interview people that are in financial planning. And I say that because it's all about what we talked about today. An advisor who just an advisor who does an important job to invest for you. Because they're narrow, the unfortunate thing that happens is there's many other areas in your life where you could be losing a lot of money. And if we're only concentrating on putting money in the stock market, if we're losing money in all these other areas, it may take away from the good work that somebody's doing for you growing your assets in the stock market. So the balance of knowing all of those things, okay, between a team of people, they could be several people, CPAs, accountants, attorneys that are in your life that are going to help you structure your estate planning and doing your taxes and give it, you want people in your life that are looking to the future all the time, not necessarily the past, because we can't change the past. Proactive solutions for your future of your money. That's what I think most folks should be doing. Seek out the people that you can trust that are in those areas and ask yourself, what is my income going to be at some point? And if you're working with somebody that doesn't talk about that, ask them, because that's really the end game for most people. So in the post-pandemic time frame, we were threatened, financial advisors, with robo-advisors. And in my firm, we laugh about that. Like, who wants a robot managing my finances? Well, it's cheap. Well, how could you have a relationship with a computer or a robot on something so important? So that was something that was gaining a lot of traction during the pandemic. Listen, some people may like that everyone has their own preference, but I certainly wouldn't want to be talking to a robot about my money. The other thing that came up a lot during pandemic and post-pandemic is really thinking about your job and your career, and the happiness that you derive from that, and the amount of money you really need to live on. How much you're living on today, how much could you live on if things changed? I know people don't always want to look at that. It's hard, right? We live in a society that's about now, and a lot of times we're comparing ourselves to people, but just trying to look inward on what your life wants to be like and what you want to accomplish. To me, that's more important than what everyone else is doing. We're competing against ourselves, not necessarily the other guy or girl. That topic came up a lot in conversations I had with clients during the pandemic, because things were kind of all over the map, and people tried to reassess their life a little bit. Now, just like anything else, when we get further and further away, right, our American tendency is to forget about things, right? And it loses its luster that it may have had 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, because we forget about it and we kind of move on and life's going so quickly. But some of the things that we've known for 100 years are still valid. I don't know the age group of everybody on this call, but my parents, right, you know, I'm 55. They didn't have credit cards in the beginning, right? So if they didn't have money, they didn't pay for things, right? They didn't just mortgage everything for the future, right? So, that philosophy has changed so dramatically, economically, institution wise. I mean, it's just, you don't even need to have money anymore. You just get it from wherever, whoever will give it to you, and then, kind of, pay the consequences later. I mean, I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit, but that philosophy of, being a steward of our own money and our own life is a lot of times the conversation that we were having during the pandemic years, because we also have had access to people more. They're freed up time, right? So we were talking to clients, I'm not saying more frequently, but it definitely we definitely had more opportunity in terms of time to talk to our clients about what was important to them. And that's the end of the day, the only thing that should be important to an advisor, whether it's your doctor or, a financial person, spiritual person in your life. What is your, goals, dreams, and what's important to you? And hopefully that helps. Any other questions?
Do you have any recommendations on how to teach financial planning to the younger generation, preteens, teenagers, college students?
Yeah, that's a great question. So things like this are great to bring them to. I'm doing actually various work with other libraries, which is I think is very cool. So bringing them to these things. You could also talk to the school. So I've in the last 8 years been involved in doing educational classes for kids in the schools, not college yet, but like literally elementary school, middle school, and high school, after school programs, teaching them about money. And that's kind of like in the end what I'm really doing today, teaching you guys or talking about money and how money really works. Like, because in the end, you have a vision, right? And you have a strategy. Then you need products to fulfill the strategies, right? And all these things, whether it's annuities, stock market, life insurance, long-term care insurance, mortgages, these are all tools that support a strategy that is based on a vision. Okay. And then underneath the products are financial institutions. What are they doing to support these products? So if a young child or a young adult starts to have a vision for their life, right, that is financially oriented, or, you know, they their ears go up when there's a money conversation, or they can learn in an after school program about money, um, that's a great way to start. There's clubs that are developed in schools that are money clubs or finance clubs. I've been involved in being guest speaker there. But a lot of it is grassroots. I don't think I don't want to get into a conversation about like the education system and where it lacks, but that's definitely an area that, it lacks. That they should be doing this very young. So and if you can give a child a book to read about money, or even just parents sharing things with their kids about money. Sometimes money is such a crappy subject with people. Nobody wants to talk about it. They may be embarrassed about what they've done in their life, or maybe they don't want people to know how much money they have. Like all these different emotions around money prevents people from talking to their own family even about money. So if grandparents can talk to their grandkids, and you know, just a conversation needs to be more uh, uh, more prevalent in our society around money, and people need to, in my opinion, be more open about it. With especially if you're talking about children in your life, they're your blood. It's not like strangers. Um, if God forbid parents die, and there's no will, right? I mean, or there even is a will. Like, how will your kids treat money? Do you know how your kids will treat money if they get money, right? I mean, all of this stuff is a little heavy. I understand that, but um, being able to articulate these things or having your children understand some of these things, you know, is very important. Um, I mean, I've had, uncovered a lot of financial wounds that people have through working with them, that things they've carried their whole life because of the way they grew up, whether they were living hand to mouth or they just were surrounded by money all the time. They never worked for anything. We had all different outcomes with how we're brought into the world and money impacts our life. It kind of stays with us. Um, Potentially for a long time. So if we could get kids on the right track to, even having some conversations with them that we wouldn't normally have, I think it opens up the doors for more knowledge and education and the want to learn about it. Anything else?
I don't see anything, Tom. I think we can go ahead and end it there. Anything that you want to just leave with?
The best thing I think you can do is really, think about if you're planning or not, um, and what's in the way of you not planning. Um, and getting advice from people um, that you trust, and spending time in the area, even if it's a little hard or it's you're not your favorite thing to do. Spending that time, giving yourself that gift of looking at kind of how you can uh, tackle these subjects and ultimately leave a legacy, right? Um, there's a lot of legacies that we can leave, not just monetarily. But, obviously that's part of today's thing. But there's a lot of things that you can do when you've kind of planned some of these things out that I always tell a client when they leave a meeting with me, if what I said doesn't make you more confident about your finances and you have more clarity, I certainly did something very wrong. So I even ask you guys today, if you didn't gain more confidence about your situation, even though we're not talking specifics or clarity around money and finance, then I wasn't making an impact, and that's a shame on me. So that's very important for people to have financial confidence and clarity. So I think I'll end with that if that's okay, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. And thank you so much for everybody for attending today. Um, I hope everybody found or able to take something from today's presentation. So I'd just like to end and say everybody be safe, be well, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.